Welcome friends to this course on understanding absurdist drama. We are in week 4 and this is going to be lecture number 1. Today we'll discuss a very important absurdist playwright Eugene Ionesco. Eugene Ionesco was born in the year 1909 and died in the year 1994. He was a Romanian French playwright whose plays are often marked by themes of existential anxiety, the breakdown of language, and the absurdity of human condition. He was one of the foremost avant-garde playwright of France, whose dramas are known for theatrical experimentation. Often held as the master of comic nonsense, Ionesco's work reflects tendencies of both surrealism and absurdism. Among the several plays that Ionesco wrote, the most prominent ones are The Bal Soprano, The Lesson, The Chairs, and Rhinoceros. The Bal Soprano was Ionesco's first play which dramatizes the banality of everyday conversation. It challenges the rationale of logical discourse, leaving audience with a sense of absurdity. In the play The Lesson, Ionesco presents a darkly absurd tale where a professor's obsessive and increasingly authoritarian teaching methods culminate in violence against a young unsuspecting student. The Chairs is a very powerful meditation on aging, loneliness, and absurdity of human life. It stages the story of an elderly couple who set up chairs for invisible audience in order to foreground the meaning of life and, of course, its consequent absurdity. Rhinoceros happens to be one of the most famous plays by Ionesco. It tells the story of an entire town being transformed into rhinoceros. In the play, human beings accept its hero, they turn into rhinoceros, which symbolizes the effect of mass conformity upon human beings and the loss of individuality. Ionesco's works emphasize the futility of human communication and the struggle for meaning in an indifferent world. His plays are not just comedies, but are deeply philosophical meditations upon human existence, exploring the complexities of modern existence. The Bal Soprano, also known as the Bal Prima Donna, was Ionesco's first play. It was first performed on 11th May 1950 at the Théâtre des Noctambules, Paris, and remains one of the most profound explorations of absurdity of human life. It opens with a meaningless conversation between an elderly couple, Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith. Their conversation is filled with cliché, with truism, with words which apparently appear to be meaningless. Soon, they have two guests. They have been given names, Mr. Martin and Mrs. Martin. Although these two guests come together, yet they do not recognize each other. Although they have been married, yet they fail to recognize each other. Don't you think so? It appears to be absurd. How can a husband and wife not recognize each other? We'll discuss this in great detail in slides to come. As the play progresses, they rediscover each other and they realize that they are husband and wife and they have been married to each other for so many years. Smiths and Martins indulge in a conversation, although their conversation is later interrupted by the arrival of their maid, Mary. Mary comes and tells interesting but nonsensical stories to both the couples. These nonsensical stories of Mary are followed by the arrival of the fire chief, who tells more nonsensical, more bizarre stories. In the play, dialogue increasingly breaks down into shouting and random sounds, rendering language meaningless. In the final scene, the Martins repeat the Smiths' initial lines, creating a cyclical structure that implies the characters are trapped in an endless loop of pointless interaction. In fact, Ionesco's play satirizes the emptiness of social rituals and the breakdown of meaningful communication, emblematic of absurdist theatre. The play had its origin in Ionesco's desire to learn English. For that, Ionesco bought a French English primer. Primer is a book with basic facts about a particular school subject, or it can be a book used to teach children how to read or learn a language for that matter. Meditating upon the origin of the play, Ionesco has written, "I bought a French English primer. I set to work. Conscientiously, I copied whole sentences from my primer with the purpose of understanding them. Rereading them attentively, I learned not English, but some astonishing truths. That, for example, there are 7 days in a week. Something moreover I already knew, that the floor is down, the ceiling up. Things I already knew as well perhaps, but which I had never seriously thought about or had forgotten, and which suddenly struck me as stupefying as they were indisputable." This self-reflexive commentary by Ionesco himself on the origin of the play highlights what Ionesco had in his mind while he was writing this play. Ionesco was reading simple short sentences from the primer, which were of course part of everyday conversation. Sentences like, there are 7 days in a week, that the floor is below, that the ceiling lies above. All these sentences cannot be regarded literary sentences or philosophical sentences. But Ionesco says, if one goes deeper into it, one understands both its banality and its profoundness. Ionesco is suggesting that everyday conversation which human beings have is mostly futile. Most of the words that human beings speak in their lives, in their day-to-day conversation, they have lost their meaning, they have become empty or without substance. There are scholars who have suggested that human beings in their lives on an average speak more than 86 crore of words. Out of 86 crore of words which human beings speak, how many of them are meaningful? And if those words are not meaningful, why human beings are speaking so many words? That becomes a very important question. You would recall your own conversations with your father, with your mother, with your friends, with your teachers, with your relatives, or in other social setups. How many of those words are truly meaningful? How many of those words are truly philosophical? And whether there is a possibility of human existence without language. These are some of the points which Ionesco desires to discuss in the play The Bald Soprano. Writing about this aspect of banality of language, Ionesco writes, and I quote, "It represented for me a kind of collapse of reality. Words had become empty, noisy shells without meaning. The characters, as we called them, of course, had become psychologically empty. Everything appeared to me in an unfamiliar light, people moving in a timeless time, in a spaceless space." as it is evident from the commentary of Ionesco, that words at the moment appear to Ionesco meaningless. They appear to be without any deep, profound philosophical substance. Ionesco calls words empty, noisy shells without meaning. And this reminds us of the very famous soliloquy by Shakespeare in the play Macbeth. Shakespeare has said, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets is hour upon the stage and is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. What Shakespeare is indicating? Shakespeare is suggesting that human life is nothing but filled with empty sounds. It is a story of an idiot, full of sound and fury, which signifies nothing, which means nothing. Something similar is being echoed by Ionesco. Ionesco is arguing that human beings are living in a spaceless space. Human beings are moving in a timeless time. Their existence on the earth is not as meaningful as they imagine it to be in their minds. We'll discuss some conversations from the play to understand the point which Ionesco is trying to make. I'll begin with the opening lines of the play, the opening conversation between Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith, which goes like this. Mrs. Smith, there it is 9 o'clock. We have drunk the soup and eaten the fish and chips and the English salad. The children have drunk English water. We have eaten well this evening. That is because we live in the suburbs of London and because our name is Smith. Mr. Smith continues to read, clicks his tongue. Mrs. Smith, potatoes are very good fried in fat. The salad oil was not rancid. The oil from the grocer at the corner is better quality than the oil from the grocers across the street. It is even better than the oil from the grocer at the bottom of the street. However, I prefer not to tell them that their oil is bad. Now this conversation between Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith is empty. It is meaningless. It lacks substance. It lacks meaning. It consists of trivial sentences. Mrs. Smith is talking about time. Whether it is 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, how does it matter? Human existence on this earth, even if it is divided into past, present and future, yesterday, today and tomorrow, has no meaning, has no relevance. Whether you live 70 years or 80 years or 90 years or 200 years, does it make any difference? It may make difference to you, but if you compare your time on this earth with time itself, with eternity, it is of no relevance, it is of no significance. Mrs. Smith is talking about soup, she is talking about fish, chips, salad, water, and she is calling English salad English water. Can salad be English? Can water be English? She is talking about potatoes, she is talking about the man who owns the grocery, about the poor quality of the oil. Now all these points highlight the banality of middle class life, how human beings pass their time speaking meaningless sentences. Now what was the purpose of Ionesco? Ionesco has written, and I quote, "My plan was to empty words of their content, to designify language, to abolish it. I was trying to find the most worn out cliches. I was trying to express ontological absence, the void. I was trying, in other words, to express the inexpressible. So Ionesco is very clear in his mind what he wants to communicate with this play. He is trying to foreground the emptiness of human life, the void in which human beings live. This void, Ionesco calls it ontological absence. Human life without meaning. Words without meaning, both indicating ontological absence. Then the play moves on and we are introduced to another couple, Mr. Martin and Mrs. Martin. The doorbell rings. Mr. Martin, Mrs. Martin arrive. However, as I have already told you, they don't recognize each other. They start discussing. Mr. Martin says, "Excuse me, madam, but it seems to me, unless I am mistaken, that I have met you somewhere." Mrs. Martin says, "I too, sir, it seems to me that I have met you somewhere before." And they go on, and you realize that they have come from the same place, they have come by the same train, they have come from the same locality, same street, same house number, same flat number, and of course from the same bedroom. And not only they share the bedroom, they also share the bed. And because they share the bed, they realize that they are husband and wife. How absurd this pantomime of recognition appears to us. Their failure to recognize each other is a metaphor for alienating effects of modern life, where people are often caught up in superficial routines and lose sight of true human connections. The inability to recognize a spouse, a husband or a wife, a figure who should be most familiar, underscores the lack of authenticity in their lives. Basically, Ionesco is critiquing modern life. The play serves as a critique of emptiness of modern life, where individuals are self-alienated, not only self-alienated but also alienated from each other. The play is also suggesting that the possibility of intimate relationship is almost lost, and what remains is an alienating and ritualistic relationship. The play also has some very interesting fables spoken by the fire chief. I'll read two fables from the play to give you an idea into what is the nature of these fables. The first fable which fire chief narrates is, "Well then, the dog and the cow" is an experimental fable. Once upon a time, another cow asked another dog, "Why have you not swallowed your trunk?" "Pardon me," replied the dog, "it is because I thought that I was an elephant." The next fable, a young calf had eaten too much ground glass. As a result, it was obliged to give birth. It brought forth a cow into the world. However, since the calf was male, the cow could not call him mama, nor could she call him papa, because calf was too little. Calf was then obliged to get married, and the registry office carried out all the details completely a la mode. Now both these fables are funny. Both these fables are nonsensical. And if you want to draw any moral lesson from these two fables, you will not be able to. First, how can a calf give birth to a cow? It is impossible. Next, Ionesco says the cow could not call calf mama because calf was male. Of course, that is right. Cow could also not call calf papa because calf was too little. Now, if you listen to these fables, you will certainly laugh. You will not be able to do anything else. Now, what is Ionesco highlighting? What is his point? The bizarre nature of these fables emphasizes the existential theme of absurdity, where meaning, structure, and logic are not inherent in the world but are human constructs that often fail to explain or make sense of life. Unlike ancient fables, which narrated the stories of animals and had moral lessons, these fables are nonsensical, they don't have any moral lesson. Ionesco is very clear that you can draw any moral lesson that you want to, because there is no inherent moral lesson in those fables. In fact, it is a mockery of morality of the fables. These nonsensical narratives suggest that there is no inherent meaning of life and there are no moral lessons to be learned. So far, you must have understood that the Bald Soprano is a play about the banality of everyday life and the meaninglessness of the words used in everyday conversation. Let us look at another example. Mr. Smith says, one must always think of everything. Mrs. Martin says, the ceiling is above, the floor is below. Mrs. Smith, when I say yes, it is only a manner of speaking. Mrs. Martin, to each his own. Mr. Smith, take a circle, caress it, and it will turn vicious. Mrs. Smith, a schoolmaster teaches his pupils to read, but the cat suckles her young when they are small. Now this is a dialogue, and there is no logical connection between the two sentences spoken one after another. There is no rationality. The conversation is happening, but it lacks meaning, it lacks sense. These sentences are disjointed and nonsensical, and they demonstrate how language can become meaningless and fail to convey true understanding, a central theme in almost every absurdist play. Ionesco is suggesting that words are incapable of expressing human thoughts, human feelings, human desires. Although words are all that human beings have, anxiety which human beings have is how to say the unsayable, how to express themselves with those words which are empty, which are meaningless, which are sensical. How to fill in meaning into these noisy shells without substance. That becomes an important concern. Ionesco is also suggesting that life is constituted by paradoxes. Logic is often contradictory and paradoxical. Like when Mrs. Smith says, a schoolmaster teaches his pupils to read, but the cat suckles her young when they are small, we know that there is no connection between the two analogies, between the two comparisons. When Mr. Smith says, take a circle, caress it, and it will become vicious, we know that it is impossible. How can a circle be vicious? But is not the circle representing the wheel of life? And don't you think so that the wheel of life is vicious, which has entrapped human beings, and because of its entrapment, all human beings are suffering? So is suffering not vicious? Is this circle of life, wheel of life, which is marked by birth, living and death, not vicious? These questions become very important. These questions become very relevant. And of course, this critique of banality of human life, monotony of human life, emptiness of language and words suggests Ionesco's critique of empty lives which human beings are living. Now, why human life is empty? Why human life is meaningless? What is the reason of meaninglessness and purposelessness of human life. Ionesco has written, and I quote, "We live in a world that has lost metaphysical dimension and therefore all mystery. But to restore the sense of mystery, we must learn to see the most commonplace in its full horror, to feel the absurdity of commonplace and of language, its falseness, is already to have gone beyond it. To go beyond it, we must first of all bury ourselves in it. What is comical is the unusual in its pure state. Nothing seems more surprising to me than that which is banal. The surreal is here within grasp of our hands in our everyday conversation." Ionesco is highlighting two key points. First, human beings are living in a world which has lost all kinds of metaphysical dimension. There is no God, as Nietzsche has famously said. If there is no God, man is cut off from any religious route, any metaphysical route, any transcendental route according to Ionesco. And because of this loss of paradise, because of this rupture between man and God, man has become alienated. Then there is also this realization that language does not reveal the truth, rather it conceals the truth. And therefore, Ionesco is highlighting falsity of language, incapacity of language to convey the deeper inner truths of human experience. It makes us think whether as human beings we lie in our lives or we tell the truth. Suppose today you go and tell the truth to your father, to your mother, to your brother, to your sister, to your husband, to your wife, to your friends. Will they remain friends with you? Suppose you tell them the absolute truth, the total truth. So don't you think so? Human beings use words as a mask to conceal the truth. Language, which should be the expression of truth, becomes a tool of concealing the truth. And therefore, language becomes false. Words become false. They become a mask to hide the reality. This realization of the absurdity of life, the falsity of words, generates the feeling of absurd. Ionesco says, and I quote, "We can no longer avoid asking ourselves what are we doing here on earth and how. Having no deep sense of our destiny, we can endure the crushing weight of material world. When there is no more incentive to be wicked and everyone is good, what shall we do with our goodness or our non-wickedness, our non-greed, our ultimate neutrality? The people in the bald prima donna have no hunger, no conscious desires. They are bored still. They feel it vaguely, hence the final explosion, which is quite useless, as the characters and situations are both static and interchangeable. Everything ends where it started." Ionesco, like Beckett, like T.S. Eliot, is suggesting that in my beginning is my end. Ionesco is saying everything ends where it started. Human beings must ask themselves what is the purpose of their existence, why they are living on this earth, and if they are living on this earth, whether it is suffering or it is a matter of happiness, whether human beings have to endure the crushing weight of the material world, or there is any metaphysical transcendental hope with which they can live. The play ends with a new beginning where Smiths become the Martins and the Martins become the Smiths, highlighting the interchangeability of human existence. Thus, the play does not have an ending. It begins again there is a fresh start and it indicates the comic absurdity of human life. Thank you, friends. We'll meet in our next class.